Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm loving the birds.
I was thinking that we don't really have a plan what to say, but some thoughts come to my mind in the morning when I wake up, and I think okay, when no one's listening to us, do we really have that freedom of saying anything we want? And if so, if this is the case, then isn't that the best therapy? I mean, the best therapy when we think we are not heard actually start. Sorry, I just crossed the road.
Be careful, my darling.
Start speaking before you are heard, before you are listened to. Start speaking something, and then see what what happens.
Isn't it interesting? This topic that you've inspired over the last few weeks about the voice, I am blown away by how many dimensions we've already discussed in that regard.
Yeah, and I still think that there is more to discuss.
Oh yes, yes, it's literally endless. And it's funny when you've opened with, I wasn't sure what we're going to talk about, but like, do we ever? I'm pretty sure this is our format, which is now pretty much determined that we come into the space and then we see what's there.
Yeah, well, I am in the mood today to generalize and just to, how to say, to energize the topic that we have been thinking of. I want to add that most of the diseases we have in the encyclopedia, at least medical encyclopedia, can be cured by hypnosis, and that means that they can be fixed purely by thorough working through some psychological issues. And if we take it as a fact and then allow ourselves to study in detail what causes what, and in this respect, I would rather rely on some authors who have already done so instead of inventing something new here. So there are authors who have already assembled textbooks or manuals on the human body where we can find the disease in the alphabetical order and see the reason that caused this or that illness. And to generalize, what I want to say this morning is that when you don't want to hear, you have problems with the ears. When you don't want to see, you have some burden with your eyes. When you don't want to walk and just trust the flow of your life, you have the problem with your legs. When you can't be flexible enough and stand still or stand straight, then you have the problems with your spine. So these are just mere examples of how the reasons could be psychological. Of course, the psychological reasons can be determined by what you really don't want to do. I've seen specialists who have been working in the area where they didn't really enjoy what they had been doing for years, and they had chronic diseases with the organs responsible for perceiving the information the way they didn't really enjoy perceiving the information.
Mhm.
Well, I was happy enough to see the opposite, when people were doing what they are meant to do, what they enjoyed, and they did not have any issues at all. And that's quite straightforward, isn't it? I mean, generalizing, we always say a bit of lies. I mean, we lie when we generalize too much, because there are too many exceptions and there are too many personal circumstances which might explain this or that factor without necessarily having some psychological reasons. But as I said, I am in the mood of generalizing today. So if you ask yourself what bothers you at the moment, and well, try to be, I don't know, honest to yourself, and admit that, well, this is what you really don't want to do.
Yeah, look, I adore you, because you can say things the way they are, and I think you completely nailed it when you said ask yourself and be honest. I have a very dear friend of mine who was paralyzed at one stage in his life, and essentially was told that he's not going to walk again. Not just walk, move, like, yeah, it's pretty much neck down. The body was just checking out. And these days, when you look at him, he's the embodiment of joy and livelihood, that so much so that you'd never think that this is the same person who was completely immobile. And I think we all know stories like these, maybe not necessarily from people we know personally. I was lucky enough to know someone personally like that, but I'm sure everybody would have heard stories like these when doctors would say, I don't know, to people that you have 3 months to live, or whatever that verdict or diagnosis would be. But if a human being really wants to live and be alive, no diagnosis can ever stop you from that.
Yeah, and at this stage, I do want to say that we generally, well, I believe that you and me both generally trust doctors. I mean, I respect their their
Profession.
expertise. Yeah,
Yeah.
I trust them in general. I'd like, well, I like to trust the doctors I'm seeing, but yeah, sometimes the nature of the human body is so strong, and the determination is so strong to live, and not only to live, but enjoy the life in the full.
I think what we could generally agree, since today is the generalization talk, medicine the way we know it obviously works, but not always. Other forms of alternative medicine works for some people, but not always. And I guess what we can probably all agree on is that we all know elements of the truth about the body, but it still stays the biggest mystery.
Mm-hmm.
But I personally love the conversation, even though you're in the generalization mode, my darling. But I do love a conversation about a personal experience. Because in the end of the day, you are someone who's given the best chance at knowing your body. And that's the journey that I love, my journey with my body discovery. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's I'm almost positive that the most important thing in the conversation about personal health is always being mindful. Like I always have this kind of filter of awareness when when a piece of information comes my way. I never just gob it up without, you know what I'm like. I always have the space and pause to kind of have my own to be with that information and to kind of have my own judgment. I'm in conversation with my own body to have my own. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that I never give the responsibility for my health to anybody else, ultimately. But I'm very open to practices and to new discoveries, especially. And some of the old new discoveries that we talked about yesterday. I was so excited to have learned about Emile Coué, the French guy who apparently is the grandfather of placebo. He was the one who essentially, well, I guess in the annals of history, registered history facts that he was a pharmacist who started giving, I don't know, water to his clients, and then telling them that this is the whatever the special mixture that is supposed to heal them from whatever it is, the ailment. So it's quite cute that he wasn't in a very traditional medical profession, and yet he was the innovator who started questioning to what degree, as you're saying, the personal psychology is powerful. Because I guess the idea of placebo in my mind is literally about proving that the person who wants to heal will. Basically, they will heal with their will. Do you know what I mean? More than anything. And the other stuff is just, I don't know, supporting factors, I guess. It's an interesting topic, isn't it? Like if you want to heal, if you have that will inside of you to live, to be healthy, is what ultimately cures you. And I'm saying all the other stuff that you're doing is just, yeah, like a supporting mechanism.
The person who believes that he or she can be healthy can get better,
Mm-hmm.
but not for a long time.
Not for a long time.
Yeah, because at the same time when Emile Curie was inventing his placebo, well, other scientists who were working on it as well, at exactly the same time, they discovered very similar things. And what I remember about those studies is that the magic wound works, but only for a few months. Like in general, for 3 months, the people who were paralyzed and then had been treated by a magic wound, and I told about that experience to our audience several times, but just to remind you, it was called Tractor. The wound was called Tractor, and it is a scientifically registered experiment carried out by British doctors in the 19th century, when they proved that, yeah, the wound without any, mechanism at all being applied to patients in hospitals worked, but unfortunately not for a long while. So people paralyzed, treated by the magic wound, would go back to their starting position, which was paralysis, over the next 3 months or so.
Interesting.
And that does not say, well, that doesn't mean to me that magic wounds could not be used for treatment. And that doesn't mean to me that we should not use placebo. It just means that, we have that kind of recurring illnesses which come again and again before we actually fix our brain, So there is this memory, the memory that is stored in every single cell of our body. That memory cannot probably be corrected instantly. I mean, it can be fixed for a short while, but then I think if we don't give up and continue treating ourselves, continue repeating some, treatment. And to prove that, I will also try to recite one of the beginnings of a self-help book, which I was lucky to read last year. The author said that about 82% of people, no, 82% of self-help books did not work. Otherwise, you would not continue coming to that shelf of self-help books. So what I read here is that we actually need to, refresh, recharge our potential by doing something. And what makes it possible for publishers to launch one book of self-help after another is the fact that we actually need to recharge, no matter how strong we are. And I do really envy those people who can read one book all their life, saying that this is their best inspiration. This is the book they carry to, business trips. When traveling with the family, they just carry one book and reread it constantly, and that inspires them. I'm not like that. I think I'm quite normal. I like experiencing something new, and reading is not an exception. Though I do reread some of the books which I have already read, but that's not the same. So speaking about psychology, self-help books, one book does not help. Well, there is an exception though here. The book which I read first when I was 16, and it is still one of the books I refer to, is a book by Louisa Hay, who is known for writing actually one of those books where you can find the disease and then see what's wrong. I mean, see the psychological reason of your illness, and then also see the affirmation which is advised for you to repeat so that you get better immediately. That's what I love about it, when you have something, well, to be personal. While walking, I do feel something in my stomach today, and I have not had anything to eat this morning yet. So, and I do know that this kind of feeling is usually caused by a kind of fear. So that means that I don't feel really relaxed. I do feel that something might go wrong, and Yeah, so the affirmation which Louisa Hay offers for that would be something like, I trust the universe, and I love my tummy, and I trust that anything that happens is for the better. So something like that. So saying something positive regarding the future, the immediate future, and trusting the natural flow of events is a kind of affirmation which she says helps when we have some tummy issues. Well, of course, that's quite general. In her book, she has a more detailed explanation.
Yeah, but
And
we've
there-
announced that we're generalizing today, so we're allowed.
Yeah.
Because we announced it up front. This is a talk about generalization.
Yeah. But what I also want to bring out this morning is that any function, if we speak about functions, remember how we spoke about functions when discussing a book by Vladimir Prop, who wrote the morphology of the fairy tale. So if we speak about functions of our body, I think it has at least two sides. Any, let's say, sense. If we speak about the senses, for example, hearing has the counterpart, which is what? Hearing and speaking, right? So when we produce sound and when we perceive the sound. So when we see something and when we create a kind of visionary art, for example, when we touch something and then we create something with our hands, using our hands and trusting our skin to check what we are really creating and modeling something. And one of the, I think, who was that? Was it one of the artists, famous artists, Gauguin or Paul Gauguin, or maybe, I don't know. You correct me. One artist who became famous, and at the end of his life, he was almost blind. Well, that's not actually a single thing. I mean, a single case. But if we take artists who create something visionary and they lose their sight, what does that tell us? If we try to think like creators, what can we read here in this situation? In the case where the person enjoys creating something, some beauty, and loses sight. This is where...
Or Beethoven, who lost his hearing completely. So the last pieces by Beethoven, he wasn't able to hear. He had zero hearing by that stage, right?
Yeah.
And yet one of the most genius pieces that he wrote.
Yeah, well, we know some famous singers as well who had their who had cancer in their throat just in the middle of their life, out of the sudden, when they were at the peak of their career in singing, and then having something like that would literally mean that they can't continue doing what they were loving most in their life. So to me, these are not the rules, but to me, these are some kind of logical exceptions which make another rule, a counterpart rule, when we probably overdose using some part of our body, and then something happens when a singer is heard that he or she can't continue singing.
In my mind, this is a little bit different from Beethoven, who could still write music. He lost his hearing, but he didn't stop writing music.
Well, you know, there are many, well, not like many, maybe not so many, but I've heard about artists who continued creating
I
art.
was gonna say, exactly right. So
Yes, and I've just heard a story of a woman who continued singing after losing a part of her throat, literally. She still continued singing. But yeah, what is that? Is that really, you know, absolutely separate or still the same kind of?
well, let's ask ourselves, what is the message? What is the message here? What is the message for us in these stories? And I can tell you what I'm seeing in that. And strangely, or actually not in a strange way, I think it very much correlates with what you said earlier, what we talked about earlier, that nothing can kill a human's will. Nothing can kill your passion. The true passion cannot be destroyed. You don't lose your talent, even if you lose your sense of whatever. But whatever you are, you still are. And I think what I'm hearing in this conversation as a message to myself is that everything that is not you, everything that is outside of you, can never be a barrier. For me, this is still a conversation about human will, the power of human will. The strength, the true strength. Are we choosing to be powerful, my darling? Are we choosing to be strong?
If we have the power to choose.
Mm. I think another thing that I wanted to recite, something that you just said, which I felt a very strong connection to, is when you said it's the memory, it's your brain that essentially defines the story. And a lot of times your disease is a story. It's something that is wired inside of you, and you just keep, this circuit keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. I went to the library yesterday and got a handful of books. One of them is called The Big Brain. But the one that I was so excited, I was like a kid in the lolly shop. But I don't know which one to start reading first. But the one that I chose to start reading first was called The Genius Within. The Genius Within. And I have a feeling that this conversation in this book is going to be very much down my alley about rewiring your brain. Even in the opening introduction, few pages, he talks about our brain being this huge resource. And what engages that resource is the connections that we're able to create within it. It's the quality and the quantity of the connections. So to your point, how do we wire our brain so that it does what we want to do, not what it wants to do? How do we rewire it so that it doesn't keep running the circuits that we don't want anymore and start running the ones that we do? Before we do all of that rewiring, we need space. So I'm grateful that you're showing us some space.
It's beautiful sunrise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure we will come back to the discussion of
Mm.
brain, its plasticity, and
Mm.
the effects we can achieve by trying to rewire, what methods to use, and so on. Because this is one of my favorite topics too.
Yep. This is my method of rewiring. I draw. Yeah, we all have our own favorite methods of rewiring.
Well, thank you for this discussion.
Thank you, my darling. I love how it's always different, and I love floating in this flow of consciousness with you and just kind of meeting each other where we're at and talking about what is. Thank you for our beautiful audience. It's always good to see you. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Have a great day.
Speak soon. Bye-bye.